night, folks. So we are doing, this is Joseph and Yeshua, session 7. And we are beginning in Genesis chapter 45. And we'll start with verses 1 through 15. Now, this is coming right on the heels of our last discussion about Joseph and Yeshua, where the cup was supposedly stolen by Benjamin. And, he's accused of the theft, and he says, I'm keeping Benjamin, and you guys can all go home. And, of course, Judah steps up to say, we can't do that. I will stay, and you can send everybody else home. I'll be surety for the brother. And it is at this time that Joseph kind of loses the emotions that he's been controlling for all this time. And this is when things start to happen. And it says in verse 1, but Joseph could no longer control himself before all who were stationed about him. And he called out, every man go out from me. And no man stood with him, while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he gave voice to his sorrow. And all the Egyptians heard, and the household of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? And his brothers cannot answer him, for they are flustered by his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me, please. And they came close to him, and he said to them, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold to Egypt. And now you must not grieve, and it must not be displeasing in your eyes that you sold me here. For it is to preserve life that Elohim sent me before you. For this 2 years the famine is within the land, and there are still 5 years in which there is no plowing or harvesting. And Elohim sent me before you to create of you a remnant in the earth, and to preserve your lives for a great deliverance. And now, it was not you who sent me here, it was Elohim. And he has made me as a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his household, and ruler in all the land of Egypt. Hasten and go up to my father, and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, Elohim has made me lord of all the land of Egypt. Come down to me. You must not stay there. Dwell in the land of Goshen, and come to be near to me, you and your sons and your sons' sons, and your flocks and your herds, and all that is yours. And I will sustain you there, for there are still 5 years of famine, lest you become destitute, and your sons, and all who are yours. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth which is speaking to you. And tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that you have seen. And hasten and bring down my father here. And he fell on the neck of his brother Benjamin, and wept on him. And Benjamin wept on his neck. And he kissed all his brothers, and wept on them. And afterwards his brothers spoke with him. That's a really powerful scene. And I don't know, I know that Keith and I were discussing last time about the movie that they made. I think it was TBN. I actually found that on YouTube. And if you guys want to, you should take a look at that. There's 2 copies that I saw on YouTube. One is in a 16:9 aspect ratio, but it's a little bit lower quality than the one that's in 4:3. So if you see the one that's in 4:3 aspect ratio on YouTube,
it's not a cartoon, is it?
No, it's not a cartoon. It's a fairly well done rendition, and the description at the end, when he reveals himself to his brothers, was really cool. Hold it, Keith. Tracy?
I was going to say, what is it called exactly?
I think it's just called Joseph.
Oh, okay.
Has it got Ben Kingsley?
Ben Kingsley is in it as Potiphar.
Okay. That's the one. Yeah, that's the better one.
That's really well.
It's not bad at all. Yeah, I thought it was pretty well done. I think it fit fit the scripture very well. I thought it was kind of funny that when they threw him in prison, he was reaching up through the bars going, my father, why have you forsaken me? Now, of course, that's not in the text, but it does go along nicely with what we're studying here. So, no, if you want to see it, it was really powerful. I cried at the end when I saw him revealing himself to his brothers. It made me cry. I was like, oh, it was really powerfully done. It was pretty well.
Do they talk about which the Pharaoh is?
They did not, no.
No one knows really for 100%.
Not really, no. There's been so much speculation about who the Pharaoh was during that time.
I wonder if he was very young, because it says here that he was almost like a father to Pharaoh.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question.
Wording.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Some people, I think it may have been that documentary, Patterns of Evidence, I think, that we watched.
When they went all the way back?
Yeah, they went all the way back and suggested that it may have been one of the pharaohs that was right around Tutankhamen.
Yeah,
Maybe just
they
before
never
him,
really
or
mentioned.
yeah, they didn't
So
quite
which
nail
one
it
it
down,
was. Yeah.
but I
Lines
got
up pretty good though.
yeah.
Yeah, it does. No, but I mean, they never really said this Pharaoh or that.
Yeah, they didn't
Pharaoh.
really identify it.
Oh.
There's some interesting hypotheses that you can find online, and there's one I can't remember, but there was one pharaoh that, according to some stele that they found, was killed by a god and drowned. I had not seen that before.
But that's your kids. They just saw Pharaoh back there. A father could represent he's being like a father to him because he's taking care of him and all his land and everything.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. Yeah.
I mean, you know.
In any event,
Just somehow.
take a look at that. It's kind of interesting. So here's a couple of questions that I have regarding this section, and this is going to get a little bit deep, and perhaps you might feel that it's slightly off topic, but I don't believe that it is at all. Might seem that way at first, but I am thoroughly convinced that it is as the prophecies say, that he tells the end from the beginning, and that this picture is not only prophetic in the sense of Joseph being a type of the Messiah, but that also this is kind of a picture of the end. And I know that some of you have probably seen stuff like this before with some other maybe Hebrew roots teachers that you have watched, that the picture that is presented for us at the end of Genesis about the things that are happening in Egypt and the 7 years of famine, and the brothers being saved in this place in the wilderness called Goshen is kind of an archetype and a foreshadowing of the rescue of the people of Elohim at the end of time, and that the story which comes immediately upon the heels of this one in the book of Exodus is also a very accurate picture of the end times. And so we'll be kind of looking at that aspect of this today for a little bit, to talk about what are the correlations here between some of the prophecies of the end time and some of the stuff that's going on here. So my first question to you is, when Judah repents as a representative, maybe I guess you could say, of his brothers, and Joseph then reveals himself to them, what might this suggest to you in prophetic terms that you're aware of? Any ideas come to mind in that regard? Tracy?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm answering this correctly, but the fact that it's Judah, Messiah comes from the line of Judah, and Judah's the one laying down his life for his brothers.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate. You could definitely stick that in there. I think that's very accurate to suggest, Judah, laying himself down for his brothers, and the picture of Yeshua is a great idea. What is interesting to me is when you looking at the aspect of Judah repenting before the Messiah. let's say that Joseph is the Messiah, and he is repenting for his whole family, it seems like, and it's showing his sorrow over his guilt and laying himself down for his brothers and kind of recognizing that he is his brother. That kind of reminds me of that we know from some prophetic pictures that we have in Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel about when Messiah is going to be revealed to the remainder of his people. We know that the Christian people have recognized that Yeshua of Nazareth is the Messiah. And that if you see here, when is Yeshua of Nazareth going to be revealed to the Jewish people?
At the end of the tribulation.
Yeah, exactly.
He already has.
At the very end.
Right here.
No, he's
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, some of them he has, but at large, though, I think you're right. There are many. In fact, I think you guys have already heard and seen, certain statistics online that there are more Jews today believing in Yeshua than there were in the first century.
Oh, really?
Which is, I know that many of you have already.
And the big change came right after Jerusalem came back in June 6, 1967. There was a big outpouring of the Ruach HaKodesh where
Yeah.
these Messianic congregations began to form.
Absolutely.
When Jerusalem came
Absolutely. So I think that is a very valid statistic, that there are actually more Jews that believe in the Messiah Yeshua than there were in the first century.
back. But not to be confused, still, majority of Jewish people
That's definitely
don't even talk to me about it.
true. Yeah,
They don't really
right. And this reminds me. This reminds me of the section in Matthew chapter 23 where he is talking about Jerusalem. Jerusalem, I have longed to gather you up as a hen gathers her chicks, but you will not, nonetheless I say to you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yehovah. So I am kind of picturing here that Judah is confessing and saying, I am repenting, I have sinned, and I want to lay down my life for my brothers. And it is at that time that the Messiah is revealed. And that's the picture that forms in my mind in relation to this story, is that when Judah repents, that we know that Judah is wrapped up in the revelation of Messiah. Yes, sir.
When you say Judah, are you thinking of the nation of Israel repenting, and when that happens, then they're going to look up the one that they pierced, and they're going to say
Exactly, that's what I'm
talking.
talking. Yeah, exactly, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay,
And I'm
I
just
just want to be clear.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, absolutely. Grace?
I don't know if this question fits in here or not, but it comes to mind right now.
Sure.
In speaking about back in '67, when so many started to accept Yeshua as Messiah, they wouldn't have been like we were, that we have believed all these traditions that we have now. So they wouldn't have been taught to not that the Sabbath isn't for today. They wouldn't have been taught that there's no unclean food, any of those things. So
Yeah.
they wouldn't have to unlearn all of that.
Well, however, they have a whole other set of traditions that they would have
Yeah.
had to unlearn.
But I mean, like,
So they wouldn't come with the same baggage that we do,
Yeah.
for sure, but they're going to come with their own baggage.
Yeah.
is it Chosen People, that group that
Chosen
Kathy,
People Ministries?
that Kathy
The one
Wilson's
up in,
with? Yeah, I think it's Chosen People.
I've seen that.
There's a
Yeah.
lady named Kathy Wilson in
She's a missionary.
Scottsdale and at Grace Bible Church and stuff. She's very involved. But they are teaching the people to become Baptists or something.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing. Unfortunately, I have seen that myself. Is that
There's people from the church our church there at Grace Bible are supporting the missions group. They have a fabulous missions ministry, but they're supporting people that are having ministry over in Jerusalem and over in Israel.
Yeah.
But I wonder what they're trying to bring them over into the Protestant type of Christianity or what?
Catholic/Protestant. That would be my
Confusing.
assumption. Yes.
This,
We're all kind
this
of
movie right
confused.
here, let the lion roar. When Martin Luther come on the scene and he's come to the realization that we should live by faith and all that, his whole concept was to get the Jews to become Roman Catholics, and they wouldn't.
Right.
And then when you read about all the horrible things that he said about them, and they're worse than animals, and they ought to be taken out and slaughtered and all this stuff at the end, that was because they wouldn't convert to Roman Catholicism.
Yeah, what it
And right.
But you don't hear about that.
They did
in church
that.
today.
They actually did that.
Yeah.
They burnt the homes of Jewish people. They destroyed the synagogues.
This movie brings that out for a
The
bit.
movie
You guys never seen
is
that.
incredibly powerful, but I'm hoping that they'll come out with a sequel because they didn't finish the story. You know,
Martin Luther didn't believe in the book of Yaakov or James, and he didn't believe in the book of Revelation. He thought they should be thrown out of the scripture.
Yeah, Martin Luther was quite a character, and I think he did a lot of fabulous things.
Yeah.
You know, he really made some awesome reformations to kind of clean up a lot of the junk in Catholicism, but he didn't go quite far enough, in my
Well,
opinion.
that's what the whole point of this is.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
really
I think that's a fabulous show that if you get an opportunity that you should check out, Let the Lion Roar,
What's the name?
because that really does talk about the church's relationship to the Jewish people, and it's not always been a
I
good
brought
one.
this tonight because Anna was going to borrow
On
it.
here, yes, unfortunately,
But
her
she's not
son,
here.
yeah, her
So
son
if somebody
was
else
ill.
wants to borrow it, there's a Blu-ray and a regular.
Tracy's tapping. She's hey, that's not fair. You were too close. No, I'm kidding. That's good.
No, I'll share. I'll share.
Well, if somebody doesn't have Blu-ray,
Right.
if somebody does have
I'm
Blu-ray,
gonna take like a DVD. She's gonna take a DVD.
what?
Well, that's a good show. Tracy, I expect a full book report from you next week.
Kids can watch it.
In Hebrew, that's right.
How old?
So I think back to your.
Please take us back to my point, Mike.
I like the verse here where it says that God sent me before you to save life.
Yes.
So he's taking on this role as the Messiah, and just God's also using him to bring back the whole house of Israel.
Right.
So I can see.
Absolutely.
Well, somewhere there's a verse that says, "You meant it to me for evil, but God meant it to me for good."
Yeah.
I'm not sure where, but in this area somewhere it's.
Yes, absolutely.
Doesn't
Which
this
verse was it?
follow the line and progression of intercessors? That Yosef is an intercessor.
Sure.
Elohim, or in fact, he even addresses in line, if you have it in the Hebrew, in line 8, he says Ha Elohim,
Yes.
which isn't used very often, but it means the one and only Elohim. But again, in a progression of because as you go down here to line 9 in the Hebrew, I think this, because it says here, he made me Elohim, meaning Elohim made him as a la'adon, as a master, l'chal, to all Mitzrayim, to all Egypt. And it says here, translated come down. I looked this word up, radah, and it's kind of interesting because the only translation I could find in Brown Driver and Briggs was like dominion or rule. So it's the essence of his station in Egypt. He was next to Pharaoh, he was a ruler. And he was telling, when he communicated, as you read on, he's saying, look, Elohim made me like a ruler here, and I'm telling you, meaning the brothers, to bring, it's almost like a commandment,
Yeah.
bring the rest of the family here.
Right. Right.
So
Absolutely.
it's-
And I think as we're thinking of this, and this kind of got me thinking in the direction that we're going to go next about them being in the midst of 7 years of famine, and him telling his brothers, for these 2 years the famine is within the land, and there are still 5 years left, and I want you to come to me so that I may effect this great salvation, this great deliverance. And that immediately takes my mind to the end deliverance, where there's a great deliverance. And I want to show you, and I know you're probably familiar with these, but I want us to review them in relation to this and see some parallels. Let's take a look at this second question I have here is, what parallel passages in the Tanakh or the prophetic record do you see that speak of the revealing of Yeshua to his brethren in the end and their great deliverance? And I have a couple of references here. I'd like us to go to Jeremiah chapter 16. If you want to take a look at Jeremiah chapter 16.
Can I throw something else in here in regards to what we were just talking about?
Throw it out and let's see if it sticks.
Where this, also what we were just talking about, where he tells them to come in, is a fulfillment of prophecy through Abraham. Because Abraham said that Israel would be held captive in Egypt for 400 years.
Yeah, he did. He revealed that to him long before. Yeah, there would have been at least 100 and some years, almost 200 years. Really.
Yeah, a long time for
Yeah.
to wait.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So this is interesting in Jeremiah chapter 16. Well, let's start at verse 10. Jeremiah 16:10. This is where Yehovah promises exile, but then return. And we can relate this to this passage. It says, when you tell these people about all of this, all of these things that I'm going to do, they will undoubtedly ask you, why has Yehovah threatened us with such great disaster? What wrong have we done? What sin have we done to offend Yehovah our Elohim? Then tell them that Yehovah says, it is because your ancestors rejected me and paid allegiance to other Elohim. They have served and worshipped them. They have rejected me and not obeyed my Torah. And you have acted even more wickedly than your ancestors. Each one of you has followed the stubborn inclinations of your own wicked heart and not obeyed me. So I will throw you out of this land and into a land that neither you nor your ancestors have ever known. There you will worship other gods day and night, for I will show you no mercy. And yet I, Yehovah, say, a new time will certainly come. People now affirm their oaths by saying, as surely, I swear, as surely as Yehovah lives, who delivered the people of Israel out of Egypt. But in that time they will affirm them with this, I swear as surely as Yehovah lives, who delivered the people of Israel from the land of the north and from all the other lands where he had banished them. At that time I will bring them back to the land I gave their ancestors. But for now I, Yehovah, say, I will send my many enemies who will catch these people like fishermen. After that, I will send others who will hunt them out like hunters from all the mountains, all the hills, and the crevices in the rocks. For I see everything they do. Their wicked ways are not hidden from me. Their sin is not hidden away where I cannot see it. Before I restore them, I will punish them in full for their sins and the wrongs they have done. For they have polluted my land with the lifeless statues of their disgusting idols. They have filled the land I have claimed as my own with their detestable idols. Then I said, Yehovah, you give me strength and protect me. You are the one I can run to for safety when I am in trouble. Nations from all over the earth will come to you and say, our ancestors had nothing but false gods, worthless idols that could not help them at all. Can people make their own gods? No, what they make are not gods at all. And Yehovah said, so I will now let this wicked people know. I will let them know my mighty power in judgment. Then they will know that my name is Yehovah. That is such an amazing and powerful scripture talking about how Yehovah will take these people who are scattered from all over the nations, not just for one people from out of Israel and taking them to another place, but from all nations and bringing them together. This is, if you will, this is the rapture that we're talking about. This is Yehovah gathering his people from all over the planet and bringing them to a place of safety and a place of protection. If you look at Ezekiel chapter 20, which we will in just a moment, to talk about this place of refuge, this land of Goshen, where the people are protected by a mighty salvation. Does anybody, did you see anything in here that we just read in Jeremiah that seemed to relate to you what's going on here?
Sending out the people out of the land because they worship other idols, but eventually he will bring them back, and he's basically taking them back right now.
Yeah. And that's another question that I have for this section, and something that, frankly, the sages of Israel have wrestled with for a long time, is why did the Father send them out of the land in order to flourish? Why did he put them in Egypt in order to become a mighty nation? Why couldn't they just do it right where they were? Now, some of the sages have ascribed some type of sin to the ancestors, saying they needs must go into Egypt to be crushed, you know.
Didn't they mention somewhere that he had to give the people in Canaan another few hundred years because their sin wasn't complete?
Their sin was not full,
And
yes.
So get Israel out of there, get them down to Egypt, let them become a nation, let these guys fill that cup right to the brim, then bring these guys back up and destroy them.
Yeah, the
I mean,
timing,
something
I think
like
you're
that.
absolutely right.
I think that's true. I think it also fits the creation pattern of the separating and gathering.
Yes.
You know, and not only with the house of Israel, but in the land, out of the land, back to the land. The same pattern that we're going through right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've been listening to some Melissa Aylwine?
Well, you
Isn't
know,
she fabulous?
Even man and being made into two with Eve and then back into one flesh. You know, it's just this pattern that we have.
Of separating and gathering.
And gathering.
Separating and
Yeah, but
gathering.
Joseph was taken away from his family, set apart, brought him to power, and then gathered back to his
together.
people.
Yep.
Saved his people. Same thing as Messiah did. Same
Yeah.
thing Moses did. He was taken away from his people, lived with the Egyptians, rose up with high power, went
Yeah.
back with his people, saved his people.
Yep.
And it's all throughout the scriptures.
Yeah, it's a continuous pattern.
And don't we kind of feel that way?
Yeah.
I certainly do.
Yeah.
That. What do you mean? Elaborate just slightly.
There were only 70 that went into Mitzrayim,
Yeah.
just tiny. So we see this, pattern of affliction, where Yahweh had gathered them there, right? For a short time, they weren't afflicted very much, it seemed, because He
Right.
gave them the best of the lands and everything.
Sure. Seemed like they were living it up for a little while.
Right, but then we know that they were put into service and slavery. So Yah had an obvious purpose of doing that, and to take them out. And then when they were taken out, they went through terrible affliction too. And He cut off from amongst them all the children that were, or I should say, the men that were 20 years and older. So He was taking out
He
a
purged
people for His
the
own
rebels.
possession,
Yeah.
and giving them His Torah, His laws and instructions. And sometimes that's where, what is it, in Hebrews chapter 13? Do not take lightly the discipline of Yah, for He scourges every son that comes to Him, and though it may seem uncomfortable for a short while.
Yeah. It's for salvation. Absolutely. Yeah. I want us to take a look at just a couple more passages that relate to this same common theme of coming out of Egypt and being brought into a place of safety and this great deliverance that is presaged by this passage here. Take a look with me at Jeremiah. We're going to stay in the book of Jeremiah for just another couple of minutes. Look at Jeremiah chapter 3. Jeremiah chapter 3. Just a small section from this one. Jeremiah chapter 3, verses 14 through 18. Jeremiah 3, 14 through 18. He says, "Come back to me, my wayward sons, says Yehovah, for I am your true master. If you do, I will take one of you from each town and two of you from each family group, and I will bring you back to Zion. I will give you leaders who will be faithful to me. They will lead you with knowledge and insight. In those days, your population will greatly increase in the land. At that time, says Yehovah, people will no longer talk about having the ark that contains Yehovah's covenant with us. They will not even call it to mind, remember it, or miss it. No, that will not be done anymore. At that time, the city of Jerusalem will be called Yehovah's throne. All nations will gather there in Jerusalem to honor Yehovah's name. They will no longer follow the stubborn inclination of their own evil hearts. At that time, the nation of Judah and the nation of Israel will be reunited. Together, they will come back from a land in the north to the land that I gave to your ancestors as a permanent possession. This is also fascinating to me how this passage relates to this, how we've got that separation between Joseph and his brothers. And this passage talking about the same thing. At that time, the nation of Judah and the nation of Israel would be reunited. This is two separate things. We've got the two trees, the two sticks, if you will, Ephraim and Judah, joined back together. And this is presaged here again. Look with me. Does anyone have a comment on that brief section there?
Just that Isaiah 11 says same thing.
Yeah. Oh no.
It says, and this is.
We're going to
interesting.
Isaiah 11 in just a sec.
Are you going there?
We're going there too, yeah.
Because this is.
This
we'll
same
go there.
theme
Okay,
is
right.
so prevalent in the prophecies that I just wanted us to take a look at this. Tracy?
I was just going to say, in this verse 7 here, and God sent me before you to put a remnant in the land for you to keep you alive for a great deliverance, is something that also is said in Romans 11:5 about when you talk about the two sticks, about the remnant. He has
Right.
a remnant according to the election of grace that he's
Yep.
kept alive. So.
Absolutely. It's interesting that remnant language is kind of interesting. And when we get to just after this next section in Ezekiel 20, I think you'll see that really more clearly. Look at Jeremiah 23 with me for just a moment. We'll wrap up here in the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah 23, and we will look at verses 1 through 8. Jeremiah 23, verses 1 through 8. Yehovah says, "The leaders of my people are sure to be judged. They were supposed to watch over my people like shepherds watch over their sheep, but they are causing my people to be destroyed and scattered. So Yehovah, the Elohim of Israel, has to say this about the leaders who are ruling over his people. You have caused my people to be dispersed and driven into exile. You have not taken care of them. So I will punish you for the evil that you have done. I, Yehovah, affirm it. Then I myself will regather those of my people who are still alive from all the countries where I have driven them. I will bring them back to their homeland. They will greatly increase in number. I will install rulers over them who will care for them. Then they will no longer need to fear or be terrified. None of them will turn up missing. I, Yehovah, promise it. I, Yehovah, promise that a new time will certainly come when I will raise up for them a righteous branch, a descendant of David, who will rule over them with wisdom and understanding and will do what is just and right in the land. Under his rule, Judah will enjoy safety, and Israel will live in security. This is the name he will go by. Yehovah has provided us with justice. So I, Yehovah, say, a new time will certainly come. People now affirm their oaths with, I swear as surely as Yehovah lives, who delivered the people of Israel out of Egypt. But at that time they will affirm them with, I swear as surely as Yehovah lives, who delivered the descendants of the former nation of Israel from the land of the north and from all the other lands where he had banished them. At that time they will live in their own land. Do you see the commonality? It just keeps all tying together about him, about the scattering and the regathering, and this family being regathered back to this land. And this regathering here is really a powerful idea. Now, I want us to look at just a couple more things, and then we can kind of tie it all together. If you look with me, at Ezekiel chapter 20. This one is really, really good. I like Ezekiel 20 quite a bit. We'll start in verse 32. Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 32. It says, "What you plan will never happen. You say, we will be like the other nations, like the other clans of the lands who serve gods of wood and stone. As surely as I live, declares Yehovah, with a powerful hand and an outstretched arm, and with an outpouring of rage, I will be king over you. I will bring you out from the nations, and will gather you from the lands where you are scattered, with a powerful hand and an outstretched arm, and with an outpouring of rage. I will bring you into the wilderness of the nations, and there I will enter into judgment with you face to face, just as I entered into judgment with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt. So I will enter into judgment with you, declares the sovereign Yehovah. I will make you pass under the shepherd's staff, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. I will eliminate from you the rebels and those who revolt against me. I will bring them out from the land where they have been residing as exiles, but they will not come to the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am Yehovah." That's a truly frightening passage. It really, to me, talks again about this bringing these people into a place of safety and protecting them. But there is a purging of the rebels. There is a cleansing. There is a purging process. And I think that if we look at the people being brought into this land of Goshen, I mean, you know that the sages of Israel talk about the fact, or their supposition, I should say, that when the Israelites left Egypt, not all of them left. Some stayed. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. It certainly could be. But I do know that just after they left, bunches of them were purged in the wilderness. In fact, that whole generation wandered around in the wilderness for 40 years, and that whole generation was purged. So what does this represent to you? How might this story and these prophecies relate to what is about to happen now? Do you have some thoughts on that, Angelina?
Well, this whole wrath poured out, mighty hand, outstretched arm, you won't enter the land. I think the details of how this is going to go down are what's laid out in Revelation.
I think you're absolutely right. I think with wrath poured out and a mighty hand is the entire description of the book of Revelation. Is all about, with a mighty hand and with wrath poured out, I will be king over you. That is describing the book of Revelation.
Revelation chapter 12 describes this very aspect where
we're going there next.
towards the
I'm ahead of you, buddy. You're absolutely right. We're going right
the
there.
other one that also and actually reveals the place. I bet you don't know that one.
You tell me.
To protect it.
What do you think it is?
I think Micah chapter 7 reveals it. It talks about the people being brought out, and he says, I will show you miracles as I did in the days when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. And it names an area. And
Well, what is it?
And it's not Petra.
What is it?
Well, you'll see when you get to it.
He's not gonna.
I'm not going to Micah.
It's in the area of Gilead and Bashan.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I think the Messiah also repeats all of this when they accuse him of being the head of demons, and he talks about being a house divided, can't stand. And he says, the one who is not with me is against me, and the ones who does not gather with me scatters.
Yeah.
So he's got a lot of the same verbiage about this house that you're making here.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's move over to Revelation chapter 12. Let's take a look at Revelation chapter 12 and talk a little bit about this purging. This is very interesting to me. Revelation chapter 12 and how this all ties together. It says, "Then a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and with the moon under her feet, and on her head was a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was screaming in labor pains, struggling to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, a huge red dragon that had 7 heads and 10 horns, and on its heads were 7 diadem crowns. Now the dragon's tail swept away a third of the stars in heaven and hurled them to the earth. Then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her child as soon as it was born. So the woman gave birth to a son, a male child who was about to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was suddenly caught up to God and to his throne. And she fled into the wilderness, where a place had been prepared for her by Elohim, so she could be taken care of for 1,260 days. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his messengers fought back. But the dragon was not strong enough to prevail, so there was no longer any place left in heaven for him and his messengers. So that huge dragon, the ancient serpent, the one called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world, was thrown down to the earth, and his angels along with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "The salvation and the power and the kingdom of our Elohim and the ruling authority of his Messiah have now come, because the accuser of our brothers and sisters, the one who accuses them day and night before our Elohim, has been thrown down. But they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they have not loved their lives so much that they were afraid to die. Therefore, you heavens, rejoice, and all who reside in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you. He is filled with terrible anger, for he knows that he has only a short time." Now when the dragon realized that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of a giant eagle, so that she could fly out into the wilderness to the place Elohim had prepared for her, where she was taken care of, away from the presence of the serpent, for a time, times, and half a time. Then the serpent spouted water like a river out of his mouth after the woman in an attempt to sweep her away by a flood. But the earth came to her rescue, and the ground opened up and swallowed the river that the dragon had spewed forth from his mouth. So the dragon became enraged at the woman and went away from her to make war on the rest of her children, those who keep Elohim's commandments and hold to the testimony about Yeshua. And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. Fascinating passage. Fascinating passage. You notice again that we have this place prepared in the wilderness, just like the land of Goshen, where the people are protected. Now here it gives you a fairly specific count. I don't know how specific you can make it, because it's, a lot of people have different ideas about that, but times, and half a time, 1,260 days. And of course you have the parting of the Red Sea in reverse this time, which is kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. Instead of the earth opening up and moving the sea comes and the earth opens up and swallows it. It's kind of interesting. But you can see this same picture being portrayed at the end of times that is portrayed here, where a place of safety is prepared for the people. Yes, ma'am.
Question might be off topic, but it's about this.
Mm-hmm.
So the woman that's being, taken to this place of safety, and then all this happens, and now the, serpent's going to go after the rest of the people that follow God and keep his commandments and believe in Yeshua. So who are they?
A fabulous question.
They're us.
Right, so we're not getting protected?
That's right.
Oh, you mean, well, you know,
We're
well, I'll tell you this. She's got an excellent question, folks. She has suggested and asked the question. Well, it sounds to me like you're saying, hey, that sounds kind of not good because the serpent is coming after us.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that is absolutely true.
So who's protected? So we're not gonna be protected?
Well, that's an excellent question because here's the thing, and I'll just ask you a question and you can think about this and you guys can reflect on this. If a bunch of the people of our Elohim are deceived and have no interest in following their Elohim and are pretending, does the serpent need to make war with them?
No, because they don't believe.
He's already got them.
He's got them,
He doesn't need to worry about them. The people who are holding to the truth, they're the real threat. So who is Satan most interested in destroying?
Saints.
You. The people who are actually following the Father.
Right.
The people who are pretending to follow the Father, or like to speak with their mouth, and they don't actually do anything that the Father says to do. I don't want to make any judgments. I'm not passing judgment on anyone, but it seems like the enemy would have. What do I care about those people?
Yeah, he's already got
They
them.
they're already doing what I want them to do. They're in rebellion. I don't need to worry about them. Now the
They're
question.
actually stepping up though already. They're like his minions now.
True.
I mean, it's happening right now.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
It's more than they're just dead wood out there. They're already.
They're already on.
His
Yeah,
minions.
there's on one side or the other. There really is no in between. I agree with you. Now the question then became, well, who's going to be protected? That is a fascinating question, which I frankly don't have the answer for. Now I know that some Hebrew roots teachers out there, Torah observant Christians, will tell you, well, if you're a Torah observant follower of God and you're doing what He says, then you'll be protected. I can't say that that's definitively true. I'd like to believe that.
Protect us why? So that you can stick around for the turmoil and the awfulness? Well, it might be better off to just let him get out.
No.
Well, my question is, who is
Well,
the
we-
woman
we-
representing? I
We
don't
have the example
understand.
here in Scripture. It says very clearly. First of all, the devil hasn't been thrown out of heaven yet. That hasn't happened. It's going to happen probably very soon.
Yeah.
It could happen tomorrow. So that chapter is also in Daniel chapter 12. So right now, everyone has a chance still. Everyone.
I agree.
Okay? The scripture in Thessalonians says we were not predestined to wrath. So the children are always going to be protected, but it's very clear that there will be some with their children will go into this special place of protection the scriptures lay out,
Right.
which is around the land of Israel. Okay? The 144,000 very clearly will come out of that. Revelation chapter 7 and Revelation 14. On the other hand, the rest of the remnant of believers, the scripture says in Revelation 14, blessed are those who die in Yahweh from now on. There are two sickles. That's the first sickle. So there will be a remnant throughout the earth that will be blessed to die for His name. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Now you have a
and the second sickle. Let me just.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
And the second sickle is then the wrath that's poured out in all the trumpets and the bowls and everything against the rest of the people who don't believe, because the prophets speak of a very small remnant at the end of the tribulation period that will come back into the land of Israel. It says those in Hebrew, those who are still alive, will come back in, and that's where your millennial kingdom, the day of Yah, actually starts. We're in that millennial period right now, actually, in the third day. It's just, my belief is we're actually, we're there. It's ready for all to happen.
It's on the cusp, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, let me just address Tracy. I'm going to come back to you in just one sec. You were talking about who is this woman and who are her children. Now, to me, and this is my opinion, and you can share with me if you like, the woman is the nation of Israel who gives birth to the Messiah. And of course, that male child who's caught up to heaven is the Messiah. Now, her daughters, her children, who also worship Elohim and keep his commandments and hold to the testimony of Yeshua, seems fairly certain to me that those are messianic followers of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So you've got the Jewish people, the nation of Israel, however you want to term them, back in those days, or even today, who gave birth to the Messiah through that nation. The children, the daughters, are, you can call that Protestant Christianity, you can call that Catholics, you can call that, now that gets a little bit more specific where it says those who hold to the commands of Elohim and the testimony of Yeshua. That's fairly specific. So that would be my dichotomy of how you would kind of break that apart.
So only Israel will be protected in this place, and then the rest of us that believe in God and follow His commandments are going to be the ones attacked.
Well, Israel, you are Israel. If
That's
you're
exactly what my point was in the beginning. That's why this doesn't
Yes.
make sense. Where's the separation? I guess.
Don't
is my
move
question.
yet.
well, it's a separation.
Don't move.
It's the two houses of Israel, in my opinion, because you've got Israel is broken up. We were talking about it. It's separated and then brought back together. So right now you've got this visible people of Israel who would call themselves, I am an Israelite, I'm an Israeli, I am a Jew, or whatever you want to say, but they don't believe in Yeshua. They are a visible representation of this father of this Bible. But then you've got these other children, we can call them redheaded stepchildren, who are rejected by them, but they worship Yeshua. And then there's a smaller remnant who worship Yeshua and keep the commandments of the Father. So they're somewhere into that group of the daughters, the children of this woman. The house of Israel altogether will be protected. What fractions of them? It's as Joseph said a moment ago. Who knows?
Well, all of those who believe in Yahweh and His commandments and Yeshua are going to be protected. And, I mean, if you look at the example of the way that other martyrs have died, Stephen, as an Israelite, but yet even though he was, whatever that time comes, Yah will pour out His Spirit on a particular believer.
Absolutely.
And you will get through it in whatever manner it is. And we just don't know. We just have to wait. Now, there will be a remnant in the earth that is not in this place of protection, also that will survive. I didn't mean to say that everyone's going to get knocked off. That's not true. There will be survivors.
Yeah. Let me get to Tracy. She's been so patient. Hi, fabulous.
You're right about it. It is Israel, and there's proof of that because Scripture interprets Scripture. Exodus 19:4 tells us, "You have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself." He's talking to Israel.
Yep.
"Now therefore, if you will obey my voice, indeed, and keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be under my kingdom, be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel." So, if you're in covenant with God, you are Israel. Romans 11 is all about that. So these people who He's after is Israel, but He's protecting them for a time and half a time in the wilderness. I feel like we are in this wilderness now, personally, and I feel protected right now. But there probably will come a time when the poop's going to hit the fan. And you look at the church of Smyrna, and that church is well pleasing to God. There are only 2 out of the 7 churches, and they will die, it says.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I mean, we're thinking about being protected in the flesh. We need to think spiritually. Are we spiritually protected?
Yeah.
Do we have that kind of faith that's like, you cannot hurt me, you cannot hurt this?
And I think that's and I'm going to go to Angela in just a sec, and then, no, not Keith, Jerry, sorry. Yeah, I think that we're moving away as our strength, the faith is strengthened, that we begin to fear death less and less. And that we only fear, as the Scripture teaches us, you are to fear nothing except Yehovah. Yes, do not fear the one who can kill your body, but the one that can kill your
You just walk with that trust
your
and
flesh.
confidence. I am protected.
Yeah.
I am protected.
Absolutely.
What can you
I
do
mean,
to me?
I have certainly been protected, and so have you. I think all of us can give testimony about the protection that Elohim has given to each of us in our lives, and in our finances, and in our health, and all different kinds of ways. Angela?
I just, I used to think I knew what was going on here, but seriously, I think we need to. I think we need to try and relax our minds about what we think we know is going on here, and open ourselves to the possibility that the timeline here, we're very self-centered in our thinking about this end times thing, because first of all, we want to know how bad is it going to be for me. Am I going to live?
Sure.
And that, we need to kind of push that to the side. And then when you start talking about this woman and her offspring being two separate, it's still Israel. It's her offspring. The woman gave birth to Yeshua. Her offspring, that's us. We are her offspring. And to say that, I've lost my train of thought, but to say that the whole part where, I mean, we decide, I see us trying to decide that this part is the part that's already happened, and this part is the part that hasn't happened yet. But that's not true, because ever since Yeshua came, the people who hold to his commandments and his testimony, the dragon's been after them. It's not like that's coming up sometime. That's been happening.
Excellent.
You can even see
So,
even that.
For us to think that the crap's going to hit the fan, it's like it has been hitting for a while. It's just, we're in such a safe place here. It's almost like, well, the tribulation hasn't started yet. Well, it has for those people in the Middle East. I'm sure if they read Revelation, they would be convinced that it's happening now. So to try and step outside of our kind of self-centered
American mindset.
and try to view this from, maybe with Israel and the Middle East at the center of it, and just make way for the possibility that what we think we knew, that we might not.
I think that is a fabulous piece of advice, is for us to pretend like we know nothing. And to just kind of,
Nothing about it anyway.
well, this is true, and this is where we have to place our faith entirely
Stay close to
in God and
Whatever happens.
trust in Him completely, because He's in charge. Jerry?
I was just thinking, there's a couple of things that we came out of when we came into the Hebrew Roots movement, and one of them was dispensationalism, replacement theology. They kind of go together. And there's a term that you hear all the time. It's called a Gentile Christian. There's no such thing.
I agree.
There is absolutely. If you're a Christian, you are grafted into the Commonwealth of Israel.
Yeah.
And if you're grafted in the Commonwealth of Israel, you are under the Torah and under all the laws of Israel. Spiritual, all of God.
You're an Israelite. Yeah, we studied that in the book of Romans. Paul made that pretty clear.
The 10th chapter of Romans verifies that this dispensationalism is.
Yeah, you're either
one of the biggest
Israel
lies in the
or
world.
you're either Israel or not Israel. There really is no in between.
It's really hard to explain to family and friends who you've known and grown up with all your whole life and been involved in church work together and all that. So what are you now? Are you still a Christian? Well, did you become a Jew?
You have to graft
And I'm
in,
like,
so you're.
I don't know what you want to call it, but what Jesus lived on this earth and what the disciples and the apostles were taught to live on this earth, this is where we're aiming.
I think that's a fair assessment.
They don't want to hear it.
No, they don't.
Because it makes
No,
sense. You can't say that without them thinking that you're accusing them.
Well,
This has nothing to do with, it's between me and the Lord. It's
Sure.
between them and the Lord. They're not going to stand before God with me.
sure.
And I'm not with them. And I can be burdened for them, but I have to not tell them that.
Well, yeah,
Not
I
right
think
now.
we need to be. I think frankly that there's not, and I have believed for a long time that your faith cannot be justified with words as well as it can be with actions. And that you don't need to talk with people about it. You don't need to beat them over the head. You don't need to try to convince people. That's not your place at all. You just live and you do what is right. And if they ask you, you can tell them for the hope that is in you. Angela?
My saying, the thing that I've learned, I think, and what I keep telling myself is that It's more important to be kind than to be right.
Mm-hmm.
I know being right is very important. And I grew up in a family where being right was the end all be all. But it really is more important to be kind than to make sure everyone knows you're right.
But don't love them in hell.
But the greatest of these is love.
Love, yes. Mike.
I think
I mean, not lie, but-
in Revelation here, the end piece that you just read, and I don't know if I'm looking at this right or wrong, but metaphorically, we know from the wheat and the tares that Satan has a false seed.
True.
And the word is also compared to water. And we see this water coming out of the serpent's mouth, chasing after this woman.
And
Water
water
also
is
represents
also
people.
representing people. A lot of places, metaphor is that the waters are like people groups, and so I think that fits
But
the
you
metaphor.
know what we do when we read this book is we want to take parts of it literally and then parts of it symbolically and mix and match as we go. And I just don't think that's
Well, I think that's dangerous too, because we can see from the New Testament what the anticipation was of the Jews for what their Messiah was going to be, and it seems that in a lot of cases what they thought was literal was figurative, and what they thought was figurative was literal. They had it completely backwards.
Sometimes I think it's both, though, that the physical teaches the spiritual, and you'll see this metaphoric piece line up with a physical piece.
Sure. I agree. I just mean that it may be things that we are interpreting in the book as what something happening literally may be a spiritual thing, and it may be vice versa for things that we're expecting. So I really don't know. I think that would be a fascinating study to see, well, what did the Jews expect their Messiah to be when he came, and how did he reflect that accurately, and how did he totally...
just in that one sentence where you said the serpent poured water out of its mouth. The serpent we want to be a metaphor for Satan. The water we want to switch and make it an actual flood going after these Israelites.
Sure.
You've taken one sentence and you flipped right in the middle of it. Can you do that? Should
Well,
you do that?
we've been given the scripture. There's got to be something.
Well, if the dragon is the, just consistency.
No, I understand totally what you're saying, but I just feel like
Then why couldn't water also be a metaphor if dragon is a metaphor? Why else does it have
Well, water represents life too, don't it?
Yeah,
I think
but a
that-
flood of water is often related to
But I thought that he was
people
already
groups.
chastised.
I think we really got to be careful here.
You have to be careful, or we have to be
We
careful?
all-
We must be careful,
We all
yes.
have to be careful because
We're speculating endlessly.
yeah,
He
you
meant
know,
the sons of God when
all I
God
can
was
say
born.
to you is,
And the devil was
you know,
against
we all have opinions about where we're at. I would say to you, I have read these scriptures and I, I could spend a week with you sitting and just talking about this and from my opinion, show you where the players are in place right now to fulfill Ezekiel 38 and 39.
Oh, yeah.
Right there. Okay? That's my opinion. But there's just too much evidence here in what's written and the pattern of how it's written. The amount of time we're spending is just not adequate. And it's important you went here to Revelation 12 because it's such an incredible chapter, but it covers a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if you look at the beginning, wasn't that the dream of Joseph about the stars of the head bowing down to him?
Mm-hmm.
So it starts with Joseph and it ends with the end of the tribulation period. There's a whole progression here. So you can't get into too much detail here. We don't have enough time to do that, but
Sure.
players are in place right now from the standpoint of Jerusalem, which is the center of all prophecy, and Israel going through Jeremiah chapter 30. Jacob's trouble's here from my standpoint, and for me and our brothers who are in Israel right now living a horror kind of life, wondering if somebody's going to jump out and stab them with a knife. Imagine walking down the street. No, but I'm just saying there's enough here that's just literal, that's represented in so many of the prophets in so many different places. And you guys have to give, in my opinion, you got to give adequate time to that, to lay it out, to examine it. And because we're in a place right now, if we bury our heads in the sands and say, well, this is not going to happen for 100 years, Well,
I don't think anyone's saying that.
No,
Not that I'm aware of.
You know, I mean,
What I'm saying is that,
Hold on, Angela.
is that some of us, believe it or not, even though we're young, have spent hours examining it and trying to take those pieces out of our puzzle box that were assumptions made by people, good assumptions, some good and some, but it's all just assumptions. And I have spent years trying to get rid of all those pieces that are that don't belong. So when I listen to someone's opinions, I want it to be an opinion. I want them to say, could it be? Or this is what I think might be going on here. Or let's discuss this, not absolutely, this is what is happening here. Because I can't stick that in my box.
That's hard to do. It's
not,
hard
not
to.
a short, not something that I don't see here yet.
Yeah.
To have someone tell
I
me
think
this
you're
is
right,
what
and we
that
need
is.
to. You're right that we need to be careful when prognosticating because
That
there
we
are
don't
lots.
state it as an absolute. I hear people doing it all the time, stating things as absolutes that are just really good theories.
Yeah.
It could be.
Well, I
that are
have
still
heard a lot
theories.
of good Hebrew roots teachers that I, respect, who have prognosticated about prophecy and stuff, and they become very, very dogmatic about saying this is what this is, and
They might be full.
it kind of falls apart, and you got to start making excuses for yourself. So I think I take your point very well that we need to be careful about
Putting everything.
prognosticating and lining up our ducks in a row. There are certain things that I think make a lot of sense to us, and we can become dogmatic about that. But I think you're right. I take your point that we need to become, a little more reserved in our judgment to see what is the Father planning and how's it going to shake out.
I just think most of it needs to stay in pencil.
A
People
fair-
are translating it into pen too early, and it's going to mess it up. It's going to mess
And
it
I-
up.
and
It's
I
going
don't-
to make for misunderstandings.
I don't hear you saying that you don't feel like some of this stuff is imminent.
No.
I hear you saying,
No,
let us
I'm-
be careful
it could
with
be
our
this, It could be
assertions.
that. I don't want to write it in pen yet.
I understand. Okay.
We
No.
can't
Because I
really
might
write it
miss
in
something.
pen until it happens. And
Yeah,
Jesus
well,
shows us.
unfortunately, that's
He
true.
hasn't spelled it out any clearer for us
Right.
for a reason. He wants us to study it and be close with him.
Sure, I agree. Tracy?
I think it's the way it is.
I just see a pretty awesome connection to this water being spewed out of his mouth. First of all, coming out of his mouth.
Sure,
So
sure.
there's a connection there. Like, there's got to be some kind of doctrine, perhaps. I don't know. But the connection I'm making here is to Matthew 7, when Messiah says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven will enter." Now, before I go on, it says that this flood came out of the mouth and swept away the woman, so that it might sweep her away or something like that, to be carried off by the river. Okay, and so he says, "Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, do we not prophesy in your name, and do we not cast out demons in your name, perform many miracles?' And I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness.' Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock," the word, his words. "Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them, doing, will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand, and the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed that house, and it fell, and great was its fall."
If I understand you, you seem to be perhaps characterizing this flood coming out of the mouth of the serpent as a heap of false doctrine.
Yeah.
So what is the earth that swallows it?
Well, I've got a paper in mark too.
Well, I think the end statement in Revelation is these people that are following the commands are the ones that he makes war with, right?
Yes.
So if they're following the true doctrine, the true commands, I think it goes along with what she's indicating as this false doctrine that's attacking, right?
Interesting.
Basically, it's the antithesis of what his word is what I'm getting from Matthew, is saying, my word, you'll be firm. If you're not on my word and acting on my word, you will be blown away by the floods and the rain and
That's
I can
interesting.
just see that connection there.
It's an interesting connection.
Um,
Jerry?
This
Sorry,
is my
Tracy.
understanding. Let me see. In Matthew 24, I think it is, when it's talking about the abomination of desolation, when the Antichrist sets up the office of pig or whatever it is on the altar.
Sure.
Christ says, Yeshua says, hope that, I just pray that doesn't happen on the Sabbath.
Mm.
But he said, when you see this, don't look back, just like in Sodom and Gomorrah, head out of town.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Satan or the dragon or whatever, he's gonna be after you, but keep on trucking, and I got your back, just like I did when you come out of Egypt. I don't know how he's gonna do it, but we're gonna be moving on, and God's gonna be protecting us.
I totally agree
And
with
after
that.
watching Penny the Codwells, I think it might be in Saudi Arabia, but that's just my opinion.
An interesting opinion. Interesting. I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree with you more regarding your overall premise. That's an excellent statement. Tracy, would you have something else you wanted to throw in there?
I can talk about it later. Just there, and I can't remember the gist of it, but it basically there's a scripture, Psalms 85:11, that says, "Truth springs from the earth, and righteousness looks down from heaven." And I went into a bunch of stuff about how this truth, the word is truth, the Torah is truth. The truth comes out of the earth on the third day and swallows up the floods of the false one. But it's a
Interesting visual imagery there. I like that.
I say this
Well,
is
if you
no
compare
God.
it to the third day, and how the waters were separated
Yeah.
from the earth, and then the seed is brought forth.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah.
Reading all that stuff could confuse you to.
Yeah, the prophecy stuff is really
I don't
challenging.
worry about it. I read it.
No, and I don't think you should. And I don't think you should be ignorant. However, I think you're right. If you are reading the word and you follow what it says and you just,
Let the Lord worry about
let
all the depth stuff, and I just say, look, let me serve you. You want to tell me something that I don't know? Tell me. I'm listening. I'll do it.
But see,
fair
so
enough.
I think it depends on the person. I think there's some people that really like this kind of stuff, and that's okay.
there's people like
And I
you
think there's
that are
some
like
people
puzzle
that
solvers.
take away from me, and I think that's okay too.
No, there are people like you who are puzzle solvers and they love puzzle solvers. We're opposites.
You don't like prophecy.
No, that's not true. I am thoroughly confused by prophecy.
You don't like mind pretzels.
I do not like mind pretzels. I don't like puzzles. I'm not a logistician. I do not like that type of thing. I'm more artistic in my flavoring. And that stuff to me can be very confusing. And it's hard to understand. But you know what? Elohim has gifted people like you who like to solve puzzles, and I believe that those people who are searching hard and are researching and are just digging for the truth are in those areas that the Father will reward them for their efforts. I gotta believe that. That He's gifted certain people in different areas.
The rest of us are putting up with it.
And that's right.
Yeah.
Deb?
I just a silly comment, but it's sort of like what Shrek said. Scripture is like an onion. It's got
Peel it like-
you
yeah.
peel it like an
That's
onion.
right.
It's got levels.
Exactly.
The deeper you go,
Shrekism.
the more you find out. You just keep finding. Oh look, there's more. Oh look, there's more.
Oh, look, there's more. It never stops. Yes, absolutely. Tracy,
I just have one more cool scripture to relate to this flood thing.
please do, and then we'll move forward.
Psalm 69:13-15. But as for me, my prayer is to you, O Yehovah, at an acceptable time, O God, in the greatness of your loving kindness. Answer me with your saving truth. Deliver me from the mire, and do not let me sink. May I be delivered from my foes and from the deep waters. May the flood of water not overflow me, nor the deep swallow me up, nor the pit shut its mouth on me.
Excellent. Excellent.
That's a song.
Now that we're all thoroughly confused, we can,
Now that we've all had a thorough bending of our minds and
Cleanse your minds
discussion,
out.
let's bring it back around
We didn't
to
get to Isaiah 11.
yeah. We're going to Isaiah 11 now.
Try
I
and-
got one more little section here with Isaiah 11.
Confuse you completely.
I'm just-
Isaiah chapter 11, ladies and gentlemen. Here it comes.
13-15.
Oh, this is
Isaiah chapter 11. Starting at the beginning of Isaiah chapter 11. A shoot will grow out of the stump of Jesse. A bud will sprout from his roots. And Yehovah's spirit will rest on him, a spirit that gives extraordinary wisdom, a spirit that provides the ability to execute plans, a spirit that produces absolute loyalty to Yehovah. He will take delight in obeying Yehovah. He will not judge by mere appearances or make decisions on the basis of hearsay. He will treat the poor fairly and make right decisions for the downtrodden of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth and order the wicked to be executed. Justice will be like a belt around his waist. Integrity will be like a belt around his hips. A wolf will reside with a lamb, and a leopard will lie down with a young goat. An ox and a young lion will graze together as a small child leads them along. A cow and a bear will graze together. Their young will lie down together. A lion, like an ox, will eat straw. A baby will play over the hole of a snake. Over the nest of a serpent, an infant will place his hand. They will no longer injure or destroy on my entire royal mountain, for there will be universal submission to Yehovah's sovereignty, just as the waters completely cover the sea. At that time, a root from Jesse will stand like a signal flag for the nations. Nations will look to him for guidance, and his residence will be majestic. At that time, the sovereign master will again lift his hand to reclaim the remnant of his people from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and the seacoasts. He will lift a signal flag for the nations. He will gather Israel's dispersed people and assemble Judah's scattered people from the four corners of the earth. Ephraim's jealousy will end, and Judah's hostility will be eliminated. Ephraim will no longer be jealous of Judah, and Judah will no longer be hostile towards Ephraim. They will swoop down on the Philistine hills to the west. Together they will loot the people of the east. They will take over Edom and Moab, and the Ammonites will be their subjects. And Yehovah will divide the gulf of the Egyptian sea. He will wave his hand over the Euphrates River and send a strong wind. He will turn it into 7 dried-up streams and enable them to walk across in their sandals. There will be a highway leading out of Assyria for the remnant of his people, just as there was for Israel when they went up from the land of Egypt. Uh-huh. What do you got, John?
Oh no, just enjoyed it.
Isn't that interesting?
We had one time.
Yeah.
Also about the people we're dealing with now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about me? No, I'm just kidding. Well, we got
Oh,
no, I'm just kidding.
No, I think that the relationship between what we're reading here in the end of the book of Genesis and this here in Isaiah chapter 11 is very interesting, in the fact that we're dealing with Ephraim and Judah and Ephraim and the people being scattered and regathered, coming back to our idea of the people of Israel being broken apart and brought back together, and broken apart and brought back together, and there's conflict between them, but it's resolved and they come back together, and that ties right in with what's happening here in the end of Genesis. Does anyone have anything? Angela, go ahead.
When it was talking about him standing as a signal for the peoples, and all these people are coming to him, the root of Jesse, made me think of Joseph, and that famine, that famine had to happen.
Yeah.
Because that's what drew them to Egypt. And so, Tracy was talking about last week, bread and the word.
Mm-hmm.
Egypt had the bread.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a famine in the land now, not a famine for literal bread, but a famine for the word.
Where is that?
And where
Isn't
is
that
that
already
driving
prophesied
us?
once?
And where is that driving all of us?
To the word.
Just
So
like
maybe
all-
this is the way he gets that process started, is he starts us so that we will seek it out.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that is absolutely what is happening when you look at the Exodus from Egypt the first time, is that you can consider Egypt to be, I mean, you've seen how if you look up in Hebrew, the word Mitzrayim is like some kind of between the straits, some kind of tight constricted place, and the rabbis have talked about Egypt as the womb of a mother that is giving birth to this nation of Israel. And it is in this womb of Egypt that the people go from 70 in number to maybe 1 million or a couple of million people. The child is developing and the contractions start and they are exited out of this womb of Egypt. And those contractions of a mother getting ready to give birth to a child, we can feel those birth pains starting, feeling them now in the world in which we're living in, saying this is, the pressures are coming, the walls are closing in, and we're starting to feel very uncomfortable. But what is that making us desire? It's making us desire to get out of this thing, and we're looking for our redemption. We're looking for our salvation. Angela?
In your analogy of the womb, they even broke the water on their way out. I mean, it was that.
The water is breaking. That's a good point. Tracy?
I can totally just
That's more that you
see
feel
all over, but it's like, think about the narrow path as the birth canal.
The narrow path,
It's
yeah.
difficult. It's hard. It's hard to get through. It's horrible at times.
Yeah.
Wish you
But what
guys
is it
could feel
for? For that ultimate opening
It's
up
for
of
life.
And that is supposed to aid that squishing is supposed to do something with breathing, with the squeezing the fluid out of the lungs so that when the baby comes out, it can take its breath.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Interesting. Jerry?
In one of my studies, the water that comes out of a woman and the water in the Red Sea, the salinity of the salt is almost identical.
Very interesting.
In the
It was either Rico Cortez or one of those that I listed.
That wouldn't surprise me a bit.
He's got a real good teaching on that.
Yeah.
Well, Hebrews are ones who have passed over. So we've got this analogy of passing
Who have
through
crossed
water
over,
through the
yeah.
Jordan.
That's right. Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
And the same letters, Hebrew is Ibri. I think he can.
Eber or something like that,
but-
yeah.
Ivrit.
Yeah, it's
Ibri.
Hebrew, but if you take the, I think, so you take the yud off the end, and the word is actually embryo or fetus in Hebrew. Same letters. So
Fascinating.
it's kind of interesting to think of Hebrews as being God's little embryos.
God's little
Or
embryos.
passing
Absolutely. It's fascinating stuff. Absolutely. I want to move forward just a little bit before we run out of time. I'm going to go on back to Genesis, and we'll look at Genesis chapter 45, verses 16 through 24. Back to Genesis 45, verses 16 through 24. 45, 16 through 24. And a voice was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, "The brothers of Joseph have come." And it was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants. And Pharaoh instructed Joseph, "Say to your brothers, do this, spur your brutes and go. Enter into the land of Canaan, and take your father and your household in your households, and come to me. And I will give to you all the good of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat of the fat of the land. And you were instructed to do this: take from the land of Egypt carts for your young and for your wives, and carry your father, and come. And your eye must not be displeased over your personal property, for the good of all of the land of Egypt is yours." And the sons of Israel do so. And Joseph gave them carts at the bidding of Pharaoh the king, and he gave them provisions for the way. To every man of them he gave changes of clothing, and to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothing. And to his father he sent 10 male donkeys bearing the good of the land of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys bearing grain and bread, and even food for his father for the journey. And he sent his brothers, and they went. And he said to them, "You must not quarrel along the way." Now, I had a couple of questions here. What do you believe that this? Do you believe that this change of clothing might refer to something? Why would he give them changes of
wedding
clothing?
gown.
What's that?
Maybe the wedding gown that When you coming back?
It's interesting that you said that, because that's kind of what it made me think of when he's giving them changes of clothing. Now, as far as him giving Benjamin 5 changes of clothing, there we go with Benjamin again and that mysterious thing. This is 5 representing grace, and here we go with Benjamin and this little mysterious thing going on with Benjamin. But what do you think about this changing of clothing? Jerry has said it reminds him of the wedding garments of the feast of the Messiah. I certainly couldn't agree more. Tracy, do you have anything else?
There's quite a few things in the New Testament that talk about the changing of clothing, the removing of the old garments and putting on clean garments. And, even in Zechariah
chapter 3.
Yeah.
Let's look there real quick.
Okay.
Zechariah chapter 3.
It's like baptism. Like going back.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at Zechariah, it's fairly short. I'll read that to you really quick, and you kind of think about this clothing, this change of clothing. He says, "Next I saw Yehoshua, the high priest, standing before the messenger of Yehovah, with Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. And Yehovah said to Satan, 'May Yehovah rebuke you, Satan. May Yehovah, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebuke you. Isn't this man like a burning stick snatched out of the fire?' Now Yehoshua was dressed in filthy clothes as he stood there before the angel. And the angel spoke up to those standing around, 'Remove his filthy clothes.' Then he said to Yehoshua, 'I have freely forgiven your iniquity, and will dress you in fine clothing.' Then I spoke up, 'Let a clean turban be put on his head.' And so they put a clean turban on his head and clothed him, while the angel of Yehovah stood nearby. Then the angel of Yehovah exhorted Yehoshua solemnly. 'Yehovah, who rules over all, says, if you live and work according to my requirements, you will be able to preside over my temple and attend to my courtyards, and I will allow you to come and go among these others who are standing by you. Listen now, Yehoshua the high priest, both you and your colleagues who are sitting before you, all of you are a symbol that I am about to introduce my servant, the branch. As for the stone I have set before Yehoshua, on the one stone there are 7 eyes. I am about to engrave an inscription on it, says Yehovah, who rules over all, to the effect that I will remove the iniquity of this land in a single day. In that day, says Yehovah, who rules over all, everyone will invite his friend to fellowship under his vine and under his fig tree." Fascinating. Fascinating. The change of clothing. Here we have this filthy Yehoshua, the high priest, who's returning Babylonian exile, who's trying to get right, and he is given a change of clothing. And we have this symbolism regarding the branch, which we know is Messiah, and this stone with 7 eyes, which I think represent the 7 spirits of Elohim, which we just talked about a little bit ago in this other passage. So that was one section that I saw, which was very interesting about the changing of clothing. What do you think that might represent for this passage in Genesis?
Well, I think here when we read in Zechariah, which I'm not familiar with very much, but he gave him a change in clothes and said he forgave him his iniquity. So I think Joseph has told him already, don't, I've forgiven you, I'm not holding this against you, don't let it be something that weighs upon you. So
right. And then he warns them, don't fight with each other.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point.
Sin,
and you see that imagery repeatedly, just as Tracy was talking about, with that the new garments, the new clothing is kind of representative of sin being taken away and giving fresh garments to cover your nakedness, if you want to put it that way.
Well, when I think of putting on clean clothes, I always think I do that when I get out of the shower.
Because you've been
Out of the
cleansed.
water.
Yeah, absolutely. An excellent insight, Tim. So how?
What a weird ritual.
What a weird ritual. So do you think that relates? How do you think that is relating to Joseph and his brothers? Have they been forgiven of their sin? Is that a picture of them being forgiven of their
Something
sin?
like that.
First they confess their sins, they can make plans.
Yeah, I think that's a good
But why
insight.
did he tell him not to argue?
That is a. I'll ask you the same question.
Maybe that's.
Why did he tell them not to argue?
Because if they were arguing, then they weren't accepting his forgiveness. They were sitting there bickering back and forth about whose fault it was that this happened.
I think that's a good insight.
They
Yeah.
were forgiven.
What would they argue about?
Whose
Whose fault it was that we all got?
I see what you did. I told you not to do this.
Whoa. Hold on, Angela. What'd you
I
say?
said, who had to tell Dad?
Who had to tell Dad about it? Yeah, that's a good point.
Did they ever tell Dad?
No,
What's
they just
that?
said he was
Did they
alive.
ever tell him?
No.
Not exactly, as
Doesn't
far as
say
I'd
so.
looked at the
Doesn't say
text.
where
It
the
doesn't
eyes
say
I read
exactly
today and it just said when they got home, they told their dad that
he's alive.
he's alive and that he wants us to come there.
Right. And of course, at
Would
the
you wanna
end,
tell
they
him?
come along, at the very end of Genesis, they come along back to Joseph and say, you know, our dad told us that you can't treat us badly.
Yeah,
And he
they-
said, you
that's
have to
right.
forgive us for what we did to you.
Yeah.
But he never said that.
No.
So there's some interesting interplay of, they're not exactly, they're still a little fearful. I
They're
think.
little liars.
Yeah, they're having a little trouble with spitting out the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
And staying
Tracy?
in prayer.
There's a couple other things that talk about agreeing in the way. Like
What?
A couple other places. that
Oh,
talk about,
agreeing in the way.
like, as
Okay,
you're
yeah.
walking, I think Amos 3:3 is the one that says, "Can two men walk unless they be in agreement?"
Right.
And then 2 Timothy 2:14 talks about do not have foolish strife or quarrels.
Over.
And then Messiah, I thought this might be related somehow when he says, agree with your adversary quickly while you're in the way with him, lest your adversary deliver you to the judge hand you over to the officer, and you be thrown into prison.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, there's something about walking together in the way, in agreement, not really sure. But
Yeah, and we talked last week about this episode having a lot to do with brotherly love and unity. In fact, it was you, Tracy, who brought that up last week about talking about, you know, he's trying to bring unity to the family. That this family has been, you know, broken apart and have had a lot of strife. I mean, we know that in chapter 7 we looked at, not chapter 7, it was chapter 37, excuse me, where we have this incident of Judah is off in the land of Canaan, you know, marrying some strange Canaanite woman and having a couple of children who die, and you know, it gets the whole Tamar situation. You know, the family has been disrupted pretty clearly, and I think that Joseph is using this trial and this temptation about food and about, you know, providing for their needs and bringing them all back together in confession and repentance and cleansing and new clothing and don't argue along the way. It has so much to do with family unity, and we can and here we are introduced to his sons Ephraim and Manasseh, which are, you know, separated and then brought back together again. So it really has to do with the unity of the family of Elohim. We have been separated for a long time, and we are about to come back together. I mean, that's the whole point of this whole thing, is to bring the family back together. I want to ask you, would you ascribe any significance to Joseph sending 10 male donkeys and 10 female donkeys to his father? Do you know of any would you ascribe any significance to the number 10?
Just so they can have
Perfect,
babies.
full.
Yes, I think, you know, it seems to me to be a common theme. The number 10 in Scripture seems to be the fullness or the completion or a whole, something like that. Tracy?
also it could represent the 10 tribes of Israel that were broken off from Judah in a way, because when you look at, you know, I even have a note here, Luke 15:32 at the end, because the dad says, my son Joseph is alive. And it reminds me of the end of the parable of the son again, where he says, my son was dead and now he lives.
Yeah.
He represents those 10 tribes coming back to Judah.
Yeah,
So it
absolutely.
could be something like
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. Good idea. Good idea. Let's move forward just a little bit. We'll be in Genesis chapter 45 through 46, verses 1 through 7. So we'll just move to 46, 1 through 7. And they went up from Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to Jacob, their father. And they said to him, your son, Joseph, is still living, and he is ruling in all the land of Egypt. Yet so despondent was Jacob's heart that he did not believe them. And they spoke to him all the words of Joseph which he had bid them to speak. Yet when he saw the carts which Joseph had sent to carry him, and the spirit of their father Jacob, revived. And Israel said, "It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still living. I will go and see him before I die." And Israel journeyed, he and all that he had, and he came to Beersheba, and offered sacrifice to the Elohim of his father Isaac. And Elohim spoke to Israel in visions of the night, saying, "Jacob, Jacob." And he replied, "Behold, I am here." And he said, "I am El, the Elohim of your forefather. You must not fear to go down to Egypt, for a great nation will I make of you there. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up. And Joseph shall close your eyes in rest." And Jacob arose from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father, and their children and their wives, in the carts which Pharaoh sent to carry him. And they took their cattle and all their goods which they had gotten in the land of Canaan, and came to Egypt, Jacob and all his seed with him, his sons and sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters, and all his seed he brought with him to Egypt. Here we have a great picture of unity and the promise of the Father. Do not be afraid. Everybody's together. Do not be afraid. I will take care of you. I'm going down there with you. And I thought it was interesting that he said, "I will bring, indeed I will bring," he says it twice, "I will bring you out from that place." And that was such a mighty thing that happened. I mean, you realize, frankly, that the name of our Elohim is known throughout the whole earth because of this.
Yeah.
I mean, that is really the testimony that we have. Just like we were reading when we started this discussion, no longer will it be said, "Blessed be Yehovah who brought the children of Israel out of Egypt." I mean, the whole earth knows about this God of ours because of Egypt. But then again, he says, in times to come, he will not be known by that, but he will be known by the fact that he brought them out of all of the countries where he had scattered them. And imagine that. I mean, he had created a great name for himself by the amazing thing that he did one time 3,500 years ago. Imagine how great it will be when he does that a second time and gathers his people that are scattered from all over the planet and brings them back to one place. That's a pretty powerful statement. What do you imagine that this Beersheba, this well of the sevenfold oath, might have to do with this story? Anything? You see any significance there? Now, Beersheba is the place where Abraham made a covenant with Abimelech of the Hittite Empire regarding room in the land. And you're not going to bother me, and I'm not going to bother you. And they offered 7 ewe lambs there. Do you have any idea about why that might be significant to this story? Any ideas?
We lost them all.
They lost them all?
Yeah, their ideas are gone.
The people in this room's idea. We've knocked their ideas right out of their heads. Just an idea. Just wanted to see if anybody had anything that they would contribute in that regard. It was interesting to me, and I thought I'd ask.
Well, sevens is part of making an oath, right? Isn't like the sevens is oath. Like the name Elizabeth or Elisheba or something like that means oath of sevens.
Does it?
Yeah.
If you say that, I will agree.
So I mean, just this word Sheba, isn't that the sevens? Isn't that what you just said?
Oh, Beersheba, 7. Yes, yes, that's.
So it's like this 7 oath type. I was just looking and seeing what was going on at this time from when he arrived to when he left, and it's God telling him, "Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I'll make you a great nation there." Mm-hmm. It sounds like perhaps it's just an oath that's being made.
That is, absolutely an oath. And I think, the fact that when Abraham and Abimelech were at this place, making an oath regarding this well, saying, this is mine, that Elohim takes them right back to that same spot where Abraham had made this agreement with Abimelech, saying, "I dug this well with my own hands. I own this land. I purchased it, and it's mine. The ownership is belonging to me. I have the title deed." Okay? And now Elohim is taking Jacob to this very same spot and saying, "You're going to Egypt for a time. I am going with you, and I will surely bring you back." And I think that might have to do with the sevenfold oath. Is obviously to me means a strong oath, which is fulfilled because of representing the number 7 is complete cycle, something like that. So the completed cycle of 7 oaths, this well being tied to the land, him saying you're going over here for a little while, but I'm going to bring you back. It's a fulfilling of this cycle. I think that's the way I viewed it. Any other ideas on that in that regard? Okay, just a small little insight. We've already answered this other question here about why did he have to take him to Egypt in the first place. I think we've kind of touched on that a little bit, and I think we only have this section here. Oh, Mike,
I was going to say real quick in 45 verse 27, like
yes.
at the end there when he's saying after he hears that Joseph's alive, right, and Joseph's representation of the Messiah, and it says that it
revived his spirit. Yeah,
and he immediately went from saying the spirit of the father Jacob was revived, and Israel said, like it was almost like he proclaimed his new name again. You know?
Yeah. I think that's an interesting study in itself. Frankly, if you look at in the times in the scripture when Jacob is referred to Jacob, and when Jacob is referred to as Israel, there's some very interesting differences there. And I think that's a key insight, and that might be a good thing for your personal study to check out sometime. This next section is obviously a list of the descendants. It's giving us accurate records. Now, I'm always confused by lists of descendants, and I know there's some interesting things that can happen sometimes when you look at the Hebrew names of descendants. I know that many of you have probably seen some of the things that people have done with, genealogies, looking at what the original names mean in Hebrew, and kind of some fascinating things come out of that. I was not necessarily able to, and I did actually go through this and translate every single Hebrew name in this section into their equivalency meanings in Hebrew. And I didn't find anything terribly fascinating. A couple of things that are just speculative, but I will put this up on the video, and you can take a look at it in your spare time, maybe. Just as an example, Reuben and his sons. So if you take their names, you've got Reuben, Enoch, and Palu, and Hezron, and Carmi. Okay, now if you translate that into what it means in Hebrew, you would say, "Behold a son, dedicated, holy, surrounded by a wall, my vineyard." Very interesting.
Well, that's very interesting. I'm like, what do you mean they're gonna find anything?
Well, I didn't want to read too much into it. Like I said, I found some interesting things, but others not so much. But to me, it was interesting. I didn't know if it would be interesting to you.
I know,
The names all meant something.
Now here, Simeon and his sons, okay? You've got Simeon, Jemuel, Jamin, and Ohad, and Jachin, and Zohar, and Shaul. Now if you translate that, it is, "And he heard the day of Elohim, the right hand, united, he will establish reddish desired."
reddish?
Reddish in
Redhead
color.
kids.
Not really sure about that one. That was kind of weird. But anyway, I leave that to you to do a little further research if you want to. It was interesting to translate these Hebrew words into what does that mean, and to see how these names kind of put together it's kind of weird. But you can take a look at that later if
But
you'd
when
like.
they're on the studying that we have seen on like with Rico and with 119 and stuff, and they're taking a verse that has been mistranslated and showing, well, there are several meanings that could be there, so take the best one. So those that you're reading they're just one meaning for each thing?
There were
options.
In a few cases, there were a couple of options. In most cases, there was pretty straight up. There didn't appear to be any alternate meanings. There were a couple that were slightly weird to me that just didn't make a lot of sense. And I almost put both in here, but I didn't. I selected the one that just didn't seem totally weird.
Yeah.
It seemed to make a little bit more sense. So, but there was only a couple, and so you could take a look at that and see. Tracy?
I wanted to just touch on where Judah rests here. He's the fourth born, is that correct?
Yes.
So, scripturally, number 4 represents authority, and we can go through that, but it's a big
I'll take your word
thing.
for it.
It represents authority, and like the sun and the moon on the 4th day to govern the night. And I mean, it's just all throughout scripture that 4 is.
Sure. The Shamash branch of the menorah.
So, and who is Judah? He's the lawgiver.
Yes.
He's giving the authority of God, the law, and Messiah came from Judah, the tribe of Judah, and he is the ultimate authority.
Yep.
So I just thought that was kind of
Think that's a
interesting.
coincidence?
And that he is the ultimate lawgiver, because after Judah is Messiah's fulfillment. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting place.
Yeah.
What does Judah mean?
Praise.
What he said? Praise?
What she said.
What is it? What
Praise?
does the word Judah mean? Yeah.
Praise, as far as I know.
Yahweh da. Praise to Yahweh.
Ah.
Yeah.
So yeah, a more clear translation. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Mhm.
Good one. Good one. So anyway, you guys can look at that list of names and see if you find some more interesting stuff. We just have one more section here. So this is Genesis 46, 28 through 34. It says, "And Judah he sent before him to Joseph." That means apparently that Jacob sent Judah ahead to Joseph to direct his face to Goshen. And they came to the land of Goshen, and Joseph hitched his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet Israel his father, and appeared before him. And he fell on his neck and wept for some time. And Israel said to Joseph, "I will die at once after seeing your face, for you are still living." And Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, "I will go up and tell Pharaoh and say to him, my brothers and my father's household who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. And the men are keepers of flocks, for they became cattlemen, and their flocks and their herds and all that is theirs they have brought. And it shall be that Pharaoh will call you and say to you, what is your occupation? Then you will say, your servants are cattlemen from our youth until now, both we and our forefathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every keeper of a flock is an abhorrence to an Egyptian." Now, just one final question that I have for this, and this is having to do with the keeping of animals. And I think that there's some significance here. What do you believe it might be the significance of the fact that this family of Jacob is comprised of keepers of animals? What might we infer from this fact that these people take care of animals? What do you think of in that regard?
They're meat eaters.
They're meat eaters. Well, that's certainly possible. You know, to me, I go back to, this brings me back for whatever reason. This came into my head when I started reading this. Was the first two sons, Cain and Abel, and that Abel was a keeper of the flocks, and Cain was a gardener. Now, I'm not saying it's evil to be a gardener, but there's something about this family and the metaphors that are continuously used about this family and the leaders of this family being shepherds and guarding animals. I mean, what do you have to be? What kind of a person?
Always compared to being a shepherd.
The Messiah has always talked about being a shepherd. He called himself a shepherd. Yeah, absolutely. So, what characteristics do you think of when you think of a shepherd? Guiding,
Loving.
protecting, loving, teaching. What's that?
Christ.
What?
Christ.
Yes, the Messiah, absolutely. I think of these people just as Tracy was talking about in Exodus chapter 19. He says, if you will keep my commandments and obey my instructions, then you will be a peculiar people to me, and I will raise you up and I will make you a nation of priests. You know, that's our original calling, guys, is to be a nation of priests. And what do priests do? They stand between those who are uninitiated and those who are initiated, those the ones closest to Elohim. Just like when they put up the tabernacle in the wilderness, you got tribe of Levi right there at the tabernacle. Everybody else on the outside. You got to go through the tribe of Levi to get to the tabernacle and interface with the Father. That's supposed to be us. We're supposed to lead and guide and protect and teach and lead people on that path. That is how this family is characterized as cattlemen, shepherds, leaders. What do you think might be inferred from the fact that the Egyptians abhor people who are shepherds?
Well, because they sacrifice to God and they don't like it.
Certainly
They
possible.
probably throw their children, like, to their deities in the fire and stuff.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that if you look at the Egyptian people and the way that you can even read some of the ancient commentaries on the society of the Egyptians, is that they are concerned not so much with tenderness and caring and loving and teaching. It's more about me. It's about beauty. It's about worshiping the male and female body. It's about worshiping these other gods. It's about greed. It's about wealth. It's about power. It's about privilege. It's about authority. That's a whole separate mindset from what we have called to be, which is loving and kind and gentle and caring for each other and being unified. It's just such a different dichotomy that it kind of makes sense that the Egyptians as a people would abhor people who take care of animals. It's kind of an interesting metaphor. Tracy?
I wanted, before we end it, I wanted to just point out something cool in verse 28. When
Yes,
it says,
please.
and he sent Judah before him to Joseph to give directions.
Mm-hmm.
That word give directions is the plural of yara, which is the root word of Torah.
Yeah.
So Judah's the lawgiver. He went before to give.
Give the way to show the way to the land of Goshen.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool.
That is very interesting. Absolutely.
In the book of Ezekiel, since you have raised that, the third chapter 34, Yahweh talks about his shepherds, who were supposed to...
His worthless shepherds?
Yes, minister, right, exactly, who were supposed to minister to his people. And he
There are a
says
lot
what
of...
he's going to do, he just
yeah.
strike him out, and he says he will minister now
Right.
to the flock.
Yeah. There's some interesting language in regards to the shepherds of Israel who've fallen down on the job.
I have a question about I asked it earlier for which pharaoh, and it's so weird. There are names everywhere, like you say, everything has a meaning, but pharaoh has no name.
Mm-hmm.
It just means big house or large house, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just wonder
They
why.
use Pharaoh for drugs too. What is that about?
Excuse me?
That's what they call it on, this is way off topic, but I've always wondered about that word Pharaoh, because that's what they call it on Deadwood. That was the opium sparrow. Remember? I always wondered
That's a good question.
why they called it that.
Maybe opium came from Egypt. They wouldn't surprise me.
No wonder they
That's
were
where it
weird.
comes from, Afghanistan.
Yeah, I know it does. A lot of it is coming from Afghanistan and the Middle East now, but I wonder if maybe in ancient times that
Yeah,
the Egyptians had a strong opium, factory going.
Yeah.
And I know that
It was
these
green
people
there
a lot
one
of
time.
times used
When I see it.
drugs in the interactions with their gods and stuff. They use sex and
Like
drugs and
Indians.
alcohol and all kinds of weird
Everything.
stuff to worship their gods. But fascinating stuff. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I have for you today. And thank you so much for your kind patience. I apologize for testing your patience and making you dig a little deeper than maybe you would have liked to in some of these bits. Let us pray, and we will move out of here.